Hi, all. Thanks, everybody. My name's Josh Pollack, and I'm a network advisor here at StriveTogether. We're excited to welcome you to our LinkedIn Live focused on kindergarten readiness. StriveTogether is a national network of community partnerships that bring together neighbors, including youth, families, nonprofits, businesses, schools, and others to work toward a future where young people can thrive in their communities. Cradle to Career Network members change the way their communities work together by building connections, sharing resources, and using data to put more young people on a path to economic mobility. And their work helps make sure young people can meet seven key life milestones so that they all have opportunities they need to reach their goals and ultimately thrive. As a network advisor at Strive Together, I support place-based partnerships working to transform systems and put more young people on a path to economic mobility. And I'm fortunate to partner with communities in the Cradle to Career Network who are facilitating collaboration across sectors and aligning key strategies that advance outcomes and enable young people to thrive. And one of the organizations I'm really grateful to work with is Marin Promise Partnership, who's joining us here today to share about the impact of their kindergarten readiness work in Marin County. And I'm excited to welcome Daphne Cummings, Director of Early Learning and Literacy at Marin Promise Partnership, Richard Raya, CEO of Marin Promise Partnership and Strive Together Board Vice Chair, and Suzanne Cruiser, Manager and Child Development Specialist at Help Me Grow Marin, to share the successes, challenges, and insights in their efforts to improve kindergarten readiness and align early education systems in the area. This is actually all just a big ruse. I have a preschooler who turned 4 yesterday, so I'm really just looking for tips and tricks to ensure they're kindergarten ready, but appreciate you all indulging us. No, in all seriousness, thanks for joining today. And for those watching, please drop questions or comments. I think we're streaming on a bunch of different platforms, so please, wherever you see that opportunity, please leave your questions. We're going to be working to weave those in throughout the conversation. But with that, Richard, thanks so much for joining the call today. I wanted to turn it over to you to just introduce everybody to the work of Marin Promise before we dive into the conversation.
Thanks, Josh. And we're really honored to be invited to present our work and look forward to hearing from folks from around the country. Marin Promise Partnership is located in Marin. You can see Marin in my background. It looks like I'm actually standing in Marin in this picture, enjoying the view. And as you can see, San Francisco is actually on the other side of that bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge. So we're at the urban-rural interface of San Francisco. And there are a lot of, I guess, stereotypes or assumptions about Marin. And some of them are true. Like, yes, it is a scenic, beautiful place, as you can see in this picture. Not all of Marin looks like that, but it is generally a very beautiful place. But it's also one of the most inequitable places in California. It's one of the top three most inequitable counties in the state. There's a long history of redlining here, and there are just deep disparities when it comes, especially racial disparities, when it comes to income, housing, life expectancy, and then, of course, the reason we're here, academic outcomes. So our organization, Marin Promise Partnership, was created more than a decade ago to help reduce these disparities. And our intent to do that was the same intent that many of you on this call have, which is to do it collaboratively, knowing that these problems are too big for any one agency to solve on their own. So we're all taking that moonshot of taking this very big collaborative approach and holding ourselves accountable to seeing population level changes in disparities, reducing those disparities. The way we did it is, like many of you, we created some action teams along the cradle to career continuum. And over the years, we have seen improvement in many of these stages of the cradle to career continuum. Most recently, Strive Together informed us that we were one of only a few Strive Together communities to see improvement in six of the seven milestones, Strive Together milestones, which are goals that Strive Together network members are trying to achieve from kinder readiness all the way up to college enrollment and beyond. So we saw improvement in six of those seven milestones post-COVID. We like to believe that that's partially a result of just the culture of collaboration that the action teams were a part of and that they created as well. What you're going to learn about today is we're going to share with you our Kinder Readiness action team, and some of the incredible outcomes that they saw around increasing preschool enrollment and also standardizing a developmental assessment process across the county.
Thanks, Richard. And yeah, we'll try not to get too jealous of your background. We were naming, I'm also based in California. And so all four of us have been trying to stay a little quiet on some of these conversations about weather happening. We hope everybody out there is doing okay and safe and staying warm where they can. But wanted to start before we dive into the meat of the work and Richard teased out some of the great successes that Marin Promise and the county have seen around kindergarten. Wanted to start with the people involved, right? We know this work can't happen without great people driving these efforts, bringing their own experiences and skill sets to this work. And so I actually wanted to give everybody a chance here. And we're going to start with Richard and then Suzanne to share a little bit about your why, kind of what brought you to this work. Yeah, would love to give you a few minutes to talk through that. So, Richard, can we start with you?
Yeah, I'm a third generation Bay Area native, so I grew up on the southern tip of this bay that you see behind me in a place called San Jose, a community called East San Jose, a very lovely, rich neighborhood, culturally rich neighborhood, but also was suffering a lot of the income disparities that we're addressing here in Marin. So I ended up, because of income challenges with my family and homelessness. I ended up dropping out of high school, but ended up going to community college, like a lot of Latinos, and using that as my avenue to higher ed. And after completing my higher education, I knew that I wanted to be in systems change. I knew that the system was not set up for kids like me, like I was, and so I wanted to create a system for kids so that they wouldn't fall through the cracks and they would get the support they need to achieve their goals. And so that's what brings me to this work of collective impact.
Thanks, Richard. Suzanne, can we hear from you next?
Sure. Early in the 90s, I was working as a senior VP in program services for an organization that works strictly with people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And we had we had an early intervention program. Many of the families needed to go back to work, but couldn't find childcare or resources to support their needs to get them back to work. And it was mainly because people thought you had to have a special degree to work with a child with a special need. Equally, we were getting phone calls every day from families whose children were getting kicked out of preschool because preschool is the highest rate of expulsion in the United States. So these are kids that are not really, will never qualify for special education, but really have developmental and educational hiccups that are really causing problems. And of course, that comes out in behavior. And then behavior is their communication to us. So with this challenge of not having places for kids to go and then kids being kicked out of preschools, I decided to join the thought process of how do we change this for people, even though the laws are there now to support them, because this was in the early 90s. It really wasn't, you have to change people's philosophical approaches and understanding from an educational point of view. So I actually got a grant from First Five Marin to start a special needs mental health project where we could work with preschools. Equally, there was a shift at that time for pediatricians to go from surveillance, looking over the body, to actually doing developmental screenings. And so part of this whole work started with that and really engaging with the Marin community clinics in embedding developmental screening into their well checks, and then working with them on how do you keep that going, as well as using that same developmental screening to work with preschool providers to understand children's developmental hiccups and where they need experiences. And that's kind of what started my work in systems change.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'm going to pause for a sec before we go to Daphne, but just want to thank y'all already, like just your expertise, your passion, and the perspectives y'all bring to this work. I'm so grateful and just so excited for this conversation to learn how that's infused all the work that you're leading. Daphne, I would love to hear from you next, but I know some of your why also ties to how this work got started in Marin. And my understanding is it kind of goes back to 2018 when a lot of this work around kindergarten readiness really kicked off. So would love if you can share your why, but also as part of that, kind of help share how this work got started in West Marin and yeah, what really jump started this.
Absolutely. So, like you said, my why really begins in 2018. I was a preschool director working in West Marin at a preschool, and Suzanne was actually my coach who came into the preschool and taught me and my staff how to use ASQs, which is a developmental screener. Um, so, like I said, I was a preschool director serving families in West Marin, and Marin Promise Partnership began their K Readiness action team. So I was on the other side of the table and actually a partner in the work, and I got to be part of that process from the very beginning. And the why for why I do this systems change work now is I saw the power of folks coming together to accomplish a really important goal. So at the time, the preschool that I was leading had really high teacher turnover rates, like 50%. So every year I was having to replace staff. They were moving over to the school district so they could get health insurance benefits, retirement. And also, we were having to fundraise, do a lot of grant reporting and applications to get scholarships for children whose families were not able to pay. Because of this collective impact work that really started by looking at data, we used something called the KSEP at the time in Marin County, and it was a kindergarten educational profile to see how children were doing. That data really was made it very clear that there were two stories. Children who were white were entering kindergarten ready to learn, and the children of color had significantly higher rates of not being ready. So we looked at this data, we identified strategies, and the strategy that we identified, pursued, and accomplished was getting the local nonprofit preschool to become part of the school district. By doing so, right now, and we've been tracking this for about four or 5 years, there has been no teacher turnover in this preschool program. Teachers now have adequate, like a living wage. They're paid a living wage. They have health insurance. They have retirement. They have benefits. They have job stability, and it really makes it a lovely place to stay. And we also managed to get a large California State preschool program contract, which serves a majority of the children. So now preschool for most, a large majority is free. So it's kind of win-win-win. And I saw that when we're actually looking at a system level, we can make an impact for so many people that when the opportunity came to join the Marin Promise Partnership team, I jumped because I thought, how amazing would this be to be able to do this work in other communities as well?
That's great. Well, we're lucky you've stayed in this work, as you've seen it from different parts of the system, and I also just already noticing just the importance of the relationships in this work, which is why we really want to start with, hearing about the people, right? You're in Suzanne's relationship, the organizational relationships, and that you also had this early foundation of success that then allowed you to do more work together, which we're going to get into in a second. Real quick, before we jump in, you mentioned ASQs, and we're going to talk about how you all landed on that. But can just for those of us that are not early childhood practitioners, educators, I was high school and middle school. I can occasionally dabble in the early childhood acronyms. But can you share what an ASQ is, Suzanne?
Sure.
Maybe, yeah.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. ASQ stands for Ages and Stages, and it's a questionnaire, which is why the Q. It was designed in at the University of Oregon, and it looks at children's development from 2 months of age or 1 month of age to 66 months of age. And there are over 3,000 skills children should be having during their first 3 years of life, and 85% of our brain is mapped for lifelong learning by the time we're 3. And so those experiences become very, very important because everything we do in life is a skill and it builds one skill off of another skill. Okay. So the Ages and Stages system actually has a developmental questionnaire, and that looks at communication, how a child receives information, how are they understanding what they're hearing, and then how are they expressing it. So it looks at both expressive and receptive language. It looks at fine motor and gross motor, which is how young children learn, is through their motor play. It looks at problem solving or cognition, like how are they taking in this information and then being able to use it for a purpose. And then in the developmental, they actually combine personal, social together. And that's because you have self-help skills that you need to learn. And that's your personal piece. Can you do things for yourself? And then how do you integrate and work with your peers and adults? So that has the social emotional component to it. If a child is really, really struggling because of trauma or social emotional issues, the Ages and Stages has a second questionnaire known as the social emotional, or the SE2, and that really looks at the child's social emotional. So it takes a deeper dive there to help you kind of figure out, is it developmental or social emotional that's causing the issues? Because again, behavior is a communication. Children are telling us something's not working for them. The reason for the Ages and Stages is because it really focuses on those milestones and it looks at the developmental sequences of development. The second thing is it's one of the only tools that is consistently being renormed and reevaluated. So you have -3, ASQ3, it's in its third revision, and it's actually in its fourth revision right now that should come out in the next couple of years. And the social emotional questionnaire has been updated too, and it's in its second stage. And the authors and are actually looking at today's children versus last year's children or 15 years ago's children, is to saying, where are these areas really a concern, and when do we need to like do more intervention quickly? And so the norm standards are the parts that have changed, which is really unheard of when you're looking at these kind of standardized tools. So I love the ISQ. It was written for the pediatricians to really be able to do that developmental check rather than just the surveillance check. But I've been using the ASQ and training the ASQ in Marin County for over 20 years now, and it is so much more. And so what we've done is really brought that to the preschool setting and saying, look, here's what you can do with it. But that's what the Ages and Stages is, and it's on that continuum of development. And I think it's the best way to learn what I called applied child development. So parents know what to expect, and teachers know when things are supposed to happen, and also give those kids those experiences they need.
That's great. Thank you for breaking that down. And there's so much there, right, in terms of what uh, children are expected to do. Also, you just named all those different domains. I didn't hear leaving Legos on the floor, so I'll have to talk to my kids about that later because it seems like that's not aligned to the assessment. But we're going to talk about like get into how you all have used Ages and Stages in a second, but I'd actually like to break it down because I think so many people see the results you have and some others in our network have, and they say, that's great, but how do I get there? And so I actually just want to back up for a sec to say, as you all began this work of looking at your early childhood system and trying to align behind a set of strategies, how did you make sure you had the right folks at the table? We know that early childhood systems, they have so many funding mechanisms, different regulators, providers. It's a very fragmented system. How did you all bring together the right folks to even begin looking at this challenge?
So I'll tell you, West Marin is a very rural area, and it's made up of several different villages, all up and down the coast of Marin. Um, and the population is, as you can imagine, significantly smaller than that of the rest of Marin County, um, which has its challenges. But I will also say um, these are very small and tight-knit communities. So a lot of folks live there and have lived there for several generations and really know each other. There was a group that was formed, I don't know the year, by Maria Nigel, Executive Director of First Five, and a couple of other folks out there, Socorro Romo from West Marin Community Services. They established something called the West Marin Collaborative, and they really just wanted to come together to plan and think through how they could work collaboratively to solve challenges. So I want to say that there was a culture that was already there, one of collaboration. So when this group was being formed, and it's actually a process that we continue to think about and bring back annually. So we have our West Marin ecosystem that we take a look at and we ask all of the partners in the room, who's missing? Who should be at this table? So it really is a very democratic process of, you know, think about your own network, think about who does this work and who needs to be at this table. So some of our really important major partners who have been there from the beginning. And these are, I think, really special folks. We have, of course, Health and Human Services, who is at the table and who is has been a very strong partner and is very aligned. Like, how are we working together to make this better for children and families? Very uniquely, there is actually the West Marin Fund. They're a philanthropic group, and their executive director was a part of all of the K Readiness team meetings from the very beginning. So she attended the meetings, she looked at the data, she listened to provider feedback, and was very vested early on in this process and really believed in it. So those are two of our partners that really work kind of West Marin wide, and then some other partners that we could not have done this without are the preschool directors themselves. So from each of the villages, the preschool directors are part of that group.
The school district superintendents too play, it's really important to have, and the medical clinics. There's a member from somebody in the medical community in that area to also sit and tell us what they're, to be a part of the open discussion.
So we really take the tool of the ecosystem and we lay out all of the different sectors and we make sure that we have identified representatives from each of those sectors. Because we know that one sector alone and one organization alone cannot do this work. It really does take every single partner committing their time and resources to make these big shifts happen.
That's great. And Daphne, I appreciated early on that you said you all revisit that pretty regularly to make sure you
Yes.
still have the right people at the table. I think that can be hard, once you've got a bunch of aligned actors, right, to actually revisit, hey, do we still have everybody that's at the table? And the fact that you're working with your partners to make sure you're holding yourselves accountable to that. I just appreciated that part of the story. All right. Well, I want to get into like the meat of like, great, you had all the right people at the table. Now, what did you do and how did this move the needle? So I'd love to Daphne and Suzanne, if you'll like share a little bit around what was the specific challenge you were seeking to solve when you brought that group together, and how did you identify and align on strategies of utilizing these ages and stages questionnaires and early screenings and intervention systems to address those challenges?
So the group had already successfully implemented one strategy, and that was the um, district preschool partnership. So once once that work had really happened, we knew that for families with children 3 to 5 or 2.5 to 5, that there were really high quality preschool options in pretty much all of the villages. However, there are no infant and toddler programs or care in West Marin currently. So I mentioned one of our partners, West Marin Fund. They actually commissioned a report, an infant and toddler report. And so they hired a consultant who interviewed families that lived in West Marin that had children 0 to 2. They interviewed all of the direct service providers, preschool directors, health and human services, play group coordinators, and really did an in-depth project on researching what are these challenges and what are families really saying. So at the end of that, they provided 12 recommendations. So my work as the facilitator for that action team is we really had discussions around all of these recommendations, and the group democratically voted and prioritized what is going to be something that is really high impact across West Marin. And listening to families' stories, which are heartbreaking when you hear about the challenges that they've had in accessing early intervention services. And when you also hear from the preschool directors who are very often sitting with families as they are going through this struggle, the group really landed on very strongly that they wanted to pursue ASQs so that we could look at this data. Because one thing I didn't mention at the very beginning is we don't have a kinder readiness assessment in California. The state of California does not have an adopted assessment. And so really, we don't have any quantitative data on how kids are doing. So this is one serving that great need right there. And we want to make sure that we are identifying any needs that families have as early as possible. So Suzanne spoke earlier about her work with the preschools, and I was one of those preschool directors. So she for many, many years has been supporting preschool directors completing these ASQs. However, this work wasn't being looked at in a regional, like through a regional lens, and it wasn't being looked at the time to advocate for additional services being brought in because it was really individuals and how do we serve that individual child. Suzanne, what else am I missing here?
I think you hit most of it, Daphne. I think the piece is that through the years, so many of the preschools have been using the data in the preschool setting, and not all the medical settings have been doing developmental screenings, which is a requirement, but they don't all do that. And in West Marin, they have a rotation. They don't even have a pediatrician out there. They actually have family practitioners who don't understand this part of the work. And so it really becomes a place for us to look at. I mean, when I first started this project with Marin Community Clinics, I was able to bring data to them to make shifts in their how they're working with families, because so many of the families were not literate. And so they stopped giving prescriptions in writing and bringing people in and talking to them differently. We had found pods of areas where children's fine motor skills were significantly below, and it was more of a cultural issue rather than a developmental issue. It's just really lack of experiences. We work with the doctors to train and talk to families about it, and that shifted also. So we know that the information can be there, but we don't have in Marin County a system of gathering all that information from all the preschools and really looking at it. We started to do that a couple years ago with the West Marin directors in the preschools to look at how their individual classrooms were doing, but there's no system to bring it into a bigger place. So this is where this work really started to say, this is aligning in all this stuff that we've been doing for a while. How do we start making shifts? How do we make it a shift and really find a community that wants to work together and use that as a stepping stone of what the county could do possibly in gathering data and for the first time really understanding what's going on for our children 0 to 5, especially since the rate of expulsion is still so critical. And we have a growing population of children that have what I call developmental hiccups that are causing severe behavior in a classroom now, where there might have been one or two 20 years ago. It's between 40 and 60% of every classroom has children that have developmental hiccups impeding on their ability to organize for purpose. And so this becomes a bigger issue long term for school readiness, because if they don't do fine motor, they don't like that kind of work. They'd rather punch their friends and go to the principal's office so they don't have to do that work, because that's what they've taught themselves to do, because their egos are involved and they need help. And so we need to go back and reteach and give these kids the skills. So I
And
think that that's the reason this all became a bigger place. And now I think the focus is let's get to them early. Let's educate parents, because parents are the primary educators for the children. So let's start at the young years. Let's start at the really young years. We know the preschools are doing ASQ, and let's blend them together as we can build this airplane and fly it at the same time, because we have parts in different places.
And Suzanne, what do you think? You touched on this, but how did you all decide to focus on systems rather than taking like a programmatic approach? You were really thinking about the whole ecosystem, the full set of partners, and
And
how you could actually move. How did you? Yeah,
how did I think I naturally came into this because my first work after college was to integrate and children with intellectual disabilities into community programs before ADA. So there was no rights, right? But we have all these people living in our community and having no place to go. So I'm talking dance classes, parks and recs. Kids want to play soccer. Kids want to go to be part of Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, 4-H. So that was my first job, and so in doing that, I had to start. I'm a systems thinker. I come from theater arts background. I'm not the director, I'm the backstage hand, but I know what the big picture needs to look at. And I think that it's my mindset has always been you can't affect change if you just are in the minutia of it. You have to look at the bigger picture and what's the goal in the big and how's it going to change for the better of all kids. And when I'm the voice of the child that has no voice, which is the special ed child, right? The child with developmental disabilities or the young child. The only way you make change is to educate and shift. And so I have chosen to do it that way. And so my entire career has been about systems changing and shifting at the local, state, and national levels in programs that I've been in.
that's great. I think two things that stood out to me from the your and Daphne's overview is also how practitioners and families were really a part of shaping these strategies for part right. To your point, there is no perfect data set you all could have looked at to identify the challenges. You really had to get out into community and activate the full set of partners to be able to get those perspectives that then informed. And also, you had to take a systemic approach because those resources didn't exist in West Marin, right? There wasn't, you had to
Exactly.
bring in systems from a regional perspective. So really helpful just to hear how both your personal backgrounds and professional experiences, but also the approach you all took to make sure that the strategies you all were deploying really were taking a systems lens. So one of the things is it's hard enough to just get everybody. Oh yeah, Daphne, go ahead.
Can I lift up one thing
Yeah,
on here? Um, I think the need for systems change and systemic change also stems from one of Marin Promise Partnership's core values, and that is equity. So we wanted to make sure, so you have to design a system so that it doesn't matter where children are, or who they know or which preschool director they have, um, because if you create the system and it means that all children get the good services that they need, then we're actually operating with equity in mind. So the programmatic approach just does not meet equity needs. If you establish a program in one village in West Marin, you might be asking families to drive an hour to reach that program. So really a programmatic approach is not going to work in a rural community that is so spread out. You really have to have a thoughtful system built so that you can reach those very hard to reach families.
Yeah, Daphne, we don't have the cloning technology to put 100 of you all around all the different villages. So, real quick, before we get to our next question, I just wanted to name, I can ask a million questions of this amazing group, but we'd love to hear from those of you watching if there are questions that are top of mind from you, whether you're a practitioner in this work, if we're coming from the backbone, partners, community, please feel free to share comments, questions, and we'll work to weave those in throughout. But look to the comment section in whatever platform you're using to drop your questions, and we'll make sure we can hear from this amazing group their answers to some of those questions coming in. Um, One of the things it was great hearing the story of kind of how you got everyone aligned, why you actually got everyone aligned behind this challenge. And then you have to get to deployment and ensuring that this strategy of leveraging screenings is actually moving the needle for kids, right? You can assess them, but how do you ensure that's actually doing anything to improve the outcomes? And so can you share a little bit like once you got everyone aligned, how did you all track that you were being effective or that you were on track? How were you beginning to tell the result along the way and monitor to ensure that you were moving the needle for kids and families?
Two things. So I do want to say that this is a current strategy. So this is a work in progress. So we are in the process right now of doing two things really. One is going contacting preschool directors so that we can process those ASQs and produce these village level reports. And then all of that will funnel up into a regional report so we can really see trends across all of West Marin. So that's one part of it. Our goal is to have 100% completion of ASQs for all children 1 month to 65 months old in West Marin. And like I said, we don't have a whole lot of data in early childhood. So one of our really amazing partners, Health and Human Services, they're in to partner with us, and they've said, okay, if you need some data, let us know what you need. So we currently have a data request to get live birth data for all of West Marin. So we will know how many children have been born in West Marin, 0 to 5. So we'll do 60 months. And we will know how many ASQs are completed. So our goal really is 100%. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to get children screened. So that's one. And I just want to give a little shout out to Marin Promise Partnership's Director of Technology, Michael Luft, who a couple of years ago with Suzanne created a prototype really of ASQs and really showed us what a visualization could look like by domain so that we could start to begin to see trends. So from that, initial beautiful data visualization, we are also in the process of launching a project countywide in Marin County that will, with a national partner, Future State, to build an ASQ data visualization dashboard for all of Marin County. And Suzanne has mentioned Marin Community Clinics. They're the FQHC that serves a majority of Marin County. They have put a program in place to administer ASQs for children. They have about 6,000 ASQs annually. So our first partner in that data visualization project is Marin Community Clinics. When we were launching that project, we saw a big gap, and that is that West Marin is not served by Marin Community Clinics, which meant that we actually needed to go in um, and be a little bit more hands-on with this data collection for the ASQs in West Marin and really go preschool to preschool and to partner really closely with the clinics out in West Marin so that they could refer families over to Help Me Grow to get support completing those ASQs.
That's great. And I appreciate you teasing kind of what's already on the horizon for y'all. What's been going well and what are the challenges right now as you all are moving this work forward?
I met, today's Thursday. I met yesterday with one of our preschool directors in Point Reyes Station. And I will say, so to be able to do this work, we have to have release and exchange of information, ROIs, between Marin Promise, Help Me Grow, First Five, Health and Human Services, and the clinics, to be able to share this data and look at it. What I heard from the preschool director is that families, so previously, in previous years, this preschool director told me that she had 100% completion of ASQs. She said, and this is, I'm sure, due to the climate of fear that we are experiencing as a nation, that families are hesitant actually to sign these ROIs because they want to know the face of the person that's going to see their information. And they have to know that that person is trusted. So we did talk. This process is iterative. We are always looking at how to incorporate continuous improvement. So one of the, actually, we had two great ideas that came from that conversation. One is to bring the information back to families. So after we collect all of the ASQs, produce the report, to have a meeting with parents and to say, and so we're not just placating and tokenizing our families, that we are actually empowering them with the information and bringing them with us in this process. So to do that, we need to present the data back to them, right? So then they see our faces, they understand what we're going to do, what we hope to do with the data, and hopefully that will encourage them the next year to sign those ROIs and to be part of the process. And we also, and this is something we did offer, we said we would love to come at the beginning of the school year. We would love to come and speak to families. And we had some preschool directors say, yes, we'd love to do that. We had some that said, not necessary. Our families know the ASQ. We've been administering ASQs for years and families do it. We have 100% completion rates. But we have some new factors right now in our world. And so we're just trying to make sure that we're being as responsive as we can, and just making sure that we're really leaning into our trusting relationships, because we know that that is the foundation for all of this work. I mean, we're really asking parents to trust us with this personal information from their very youngest babies at home, right? So that's a big responsibility. So I think being more in community, and really incorporating their voice and their feedback is going to be critical.
Yeah, I imagine it's also after the screenings, right? Ensuring because of that trust, how critical it is to ensure there's the resources to actually provide the relevant supports and referrals and right. Just assessing isn't right. How do you ensure that there's responsiveness to those assessments to continue to build that trust? Suzanne, it looked like you were going to jam.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. It's also as critical for us to understand what is going on in the community. And unfortunately, in that community, there has been some housing uproar going on, and a huge amount of mistrust with politicians and local people and people that have money out there. And so people are losing their housing and they're losing their jobs. And so the mistrust is we have to be very thoughtful of that. And I think that that is also like helps us know that you take 2 steps forward, but maybe you need to take 4 steps backwards for a minute and see what else you can do to build the trust rather than get the outcome at that point. So I think it's it's a very delicate game, but we have to, with those villages, we have to be really thoughtful about that. And right now, that's a critical piece of what's going on in the West Marin community is that there is a lack of trust with county, bigger programs, and anything that has government attached to it. So, and now it's like, even a community-based organization, I'm not sure if I'm going to play with you because I'm not sure where you are in this game.
Can I
Yeah. Oh,
can I
go
lift
ahead.
one more thing up,
Mhm.
Josh? So sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
So I think one of the beautiful pieces of this work is that Help Me Grow is um, right there through the process, right? So it is Marin Promise Partnership, but it really is Help Me Grow, who is working directly with the preschool directors, doing the presentations to the families to give them this information. And another really important piece that Help Me Grow holds is also case management, actually. So once these developmental delays are identified, Help Me Grow has already been there from the very beginning of that relationship, building that trust, and then is also able to be with families as they walk them through the process. And that is one of the challenges that preschool directors lifted up is that there are actually very, very, very few services in West Marin for children with developmental delays and needs. So very often, families are told you need to drive or put your baby on a bus for an hour, hour and a half to go over to Central Marin to get these services. So one of our desired outcomes with this work would be to use this data to advocate for services to go to families. With Help Me Grow as an advocate, holding, walking with families through the process. So families are really supported all the way through.
Which is why the school districts are so critical because the 3 to 5 year olds are served by the school districts, and even they have to get on a bus and go. So bringing the services to the area in a centralized place is another hopeful outcome we have of this systems change that we're doing.
Yeah, I feel like in this work, occasionally we can get caught in our own jargon, and sometimes we talk about the work of Cradle to Career Partnerships as building civic infrastructure. But I think you all actually just did a great job of showing, not just telling, what civic, like that building of trust, leveraging of data, mobilizing the right partners, and actually using that to drive systems and policy change. I feel like you just captured the whole arc. So we'll have to maybe create some graphics or breakouts on that. But Richard, I want to pull you back in because I know you've been leading the work in Promise Partnership recently, but have also been done this work in more urban settings and bring that perspective. I think we talked earlier about how West Marin is a little bit more of a rural environment. Can you share just a little bit about how you see the unique challenges of doing this collective impact work in more rural settings or in places that have both urban and rural areas? And then Daphne and Suzanne, if there's anything specific to early childhood, can bring you back in. But yeah, Richard, would you just share a little bit about how you found
Yeah,
it?
and I'll start just by giving a little more context about the rural challenges of West Marin. So there is a large agricultural workforce with limited or substandard housing opportunities for them. And also, as the economy changes and some industries begin to shut down, we're seeing further displacement of some of these families. So at the same time that we're trying to help kids meet developmental standards and do well in school, we're recognizing that their families are dealing with these larger existential challenges. And I think in part because West Marin is isolated, and because there is a lack of resources or civic or even civic infrastructure, as you described, Josh, I think it actually forced the collaboration that we saw. And as both Daphne and Suzanne mentioned earlier, there were just some critical players that I feel like there are some lessons to kind of lift up from this as a rural experience. The West Marin Fund, so a philanthropic organization, was not at the 10,000 foot level only. They were at the community meetings. They were convening community meetings. They had that ability to bring folks together, to bring other systems along, like Health and Human Services. And it helped, I think, to have sort of visionary leaders in government, in Health and Human Services, folks who were connected to community, who were not sort of stuck in a silo. That was also important for this to actually all come together. I will say also that even though I said earlier, because this community was less resourced, it was forced to collaborate, but it ended up becoming kind of the template for the more urban areas of Marin. So the action team that Daphne was part of, she's kind of used that as a template to create similar action teams in Marin City, in a neighborhood called The Canal in San Rafael. Both of these neighborhoods are they're not rural at all, and they're extremely unique in their own way. The Canal, for example, is the most segregated Latino community in the entire Bay Area and the most densely populated census tract in the Bay Area outside of Chinatown, believe it or not, in San Francisco. So something that you wouldn't expect in Marin, but there it is, and it has all of those challenges that go along with segregation and density and also climate change, which we don't have time to get into on this call. But again, Daphne took that approach to the canal, and it's working, this collaborative approach, building on the relationships that she built with system leaders who were in working in West Marin, like building on those in the canal and in Marin City. Marin City, a historically black community that formed during World War II when the U.S. government needed workers to work on ships, build ships. So lots of black folks came from the South, settled in Marin City, and it's got that legacy now of being a historically black community with a tremendously rich cultural heritage, but also facing decades of redlining and underinvestment. So again, bringing these tools to both Marin City and the canal has been, I think, fascinating to see the rural community setting the template for the other communities.
Yeah, Daphne, do you want to share a little bit more about some of the work in Marin City in particular around early childhood that this kind of led to?
It's really interesting. You mentioned Marin City because th the work has been very parallel, I will say. So in West Marin, the first strategy that the group pursued was a district preschool partnership that was successful. The person who was in my role at the time, Maria Nigel, was then working in Marin City and said, hey, they just had this successful strategy in West Marin. And so actually, Marin City also pursued a district preschool partnership successfully and brought to a CSPP contract over $1 million and a CCTR, that's a general childcare contract, to that community. And that one was, I think, around $1 million as well. So that now there is a beautiful program, Horizon Community School, that serves, I think, I know it's over 50 Black children in a school that is run by Black Marin City leaders serving Black Marin City children. So success in West Marin, success in Marin City. We started the early screening and intervention strategy in West Marin. We did a very deep dive in Marin City, and actually Suzanne is a partner in that action team as well. We started talking to Marin City folks about what their biggest challenge is. And guess what? It is early screening and intervention. So we are also pursuing a similar strategy in Marin City, and they have very similar. I know it's a different community, and they're more urban, and West Marin is rural. However, they're also unincorporated, and there are very few services that are offered to Marin City. So again, Marin Community Clinic serves a majority of Marin County. They do not serve Marin City, and they do not serve West Marin. And so those two communities are largely left out of any innovative programs that organization is doing, which brings me, sorry, to my last thing. I know we're getting close on time, is the idea around economy of scale, right? So when you are working in a community like the Canal that has about a little under 2,000 children, 0 to 5, you have economy of scale. You can really bring services and and use state government funding to pay for them because you have so many children. In West Marin, there are about 200 children, 0 to 5, right? And so that economy of scale just doesn't work. So you know that the cost of those services is going to be higher, but that doesn't mean that those children do not deserve those services. And the same thing for Marin City. Marin City has about a similar number of children in a much smaller geographical area. But when programs try to come and they, only get a handful of children, they're really not able to sustain the way that they can in some larger, more populated areas. So I think that's just something people need to know. It is going to cost more to do business in rural communities.
Thanks for that. I'm going to turn it over to Richard because we got into some of the neighborhood differences that you are engaged in. Real before I turn it over to Richard, just a couple questions that have actually come in from the audience around ASQs that Daphne and Suzanne, I'm wondering if you can answer. One is you mentioned the resourcing that Marin City put towards this. As you think about policy change that would sustain some of this ASQ driven work, are there local or state policies that you think could accelerate or sustain ASQ? And then similarly, what would be your advice to folks that are just thinking about diving into this ASQ work and trying to get the right folks to the table and pursue that as a strategy?
So I don't know of any state or policies that would help accelerate ASQ. I know that there is part of the quality early care and education quality improvement project, ASQ, that comes out of the CDE. The ASQ is a requirement for quality improvement rating for the state subsidized preschools. So there is that's pushing this a little bit more. Daphne, do you know anything else?
Well, one thing that did come to my mind are CalAIM services. So we know that if we are able to identify that children have developmental delays, then it might open the door to being able to access more CalAIM services, which Help Me Grow is able to pull down that funding. So that is one potential. It's not directly related, but I do think that if folks are thinking systemically and really connecting a lot of dots, it might be a piece that you want to pull in there to help identify children and families who might need more services. So that's one piece. And the thing that I would say to folks who are maybe thinking about getting started with this work, I know it's a big decision to kind of choose one assessment. I think that the ASQ is a really beautiful tool. And Suzanne talked about I think its scientific merits in that it is continuously being updated. It came out of a university. It is, it is a reliable tool and all of that. But the piece that I want to lift up is the ASQ uses very everyday language, which is why I think it's such a beautiful tool. It really empowers families to be their children's advocates. And it's a lot easier. I can tell you as a preschool director that had a parent board, those families who joined the preschool parent board are the families who went on to become PTA presidents and ELAC presidents and representatives on school site councils. And so I think if we can empower families and give them tools and language as early as possible, um, we really are thinking longitudinally. We really are thinking cradle to career by starting at the very beginning and giving them that language and those tools to really move through the educational system with their children for the rest of their lives.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add to Nicole's question is like one piece of advice that we could give to communities who are just starting the work is to really do a survey of your community who is using the ASQ-3 and the ASQ SE, including asking your local clinics and your private pediatricians. And then, and on those questions, I would ask at what intervals are they using them? Are they only doing it once or twice at the very young years? And then that'll help you get a surveillance of who is using it to know like what the next step is.
Thank you both. I know we're at time, but before we leave, you all have had so much success with this work and would love, Richard, for you to highlight kind of how all of these wins that Marin has been experiencing, how are you now using that for the next phase of work as you look at a neighborhood approach?
Yeah, we're also grateful that for this work that Daphne and Suzanne have led. And what we're doing now is adding it to a geographic approach, a place-based approach, which Daphne kind of alluded to this. We want to make sure that there is a cradle to career continuum of supports in each of these places we just described. So in the same way that there's an action team focused on early learning, there's also an action team focused on college and career in this place. And at the end of that process, we want to have what we're calling Promise Neighborhoods in the spirit of the Harlem Children's Zone or the Promise Neighborhoods program that President Obama created based on the Harlem Children's Zone model. That's what we want to create, wraparound supports along the cradle to career continuum for students, recognizing the uniqueness of the place that they're in. So we've embarked on this Promise Neighborhood planning process for multiple communities in Marin. And we expect over the next 2 years to actually end up with some what we're calling investable plans for each of these communities.
Thanks, Richard. And I realize it's getting late in some time zones, so I'm going to close us out. But just want to say a huge thank you for everyone who joined today in the audience, but also special shout out Daphne, Richard, Suzanne. Thank you so much for sharing more about the work of Marin Promise Partnership. We've actually StriveTogether has recently published a blog detailing Marin Promise's work in this area, and Marin Promise Partnership recently released a video covering their work to increase preschool access and improve kindergarten readiness. And we're going to drop those resources in the live stream. If your team is looking to make an impact in kindergarten readiness, we also are going to provide a link to the StriveTogether Kindergarten Readiness Playbook to get you started and think about the impact you want to make, key indicators and strategies you can use to address kindergarten readiness. In January, we focused on kindergarten readiness, but in February, we're going to be gearing up to share resources around early grade reading. So we actually have our next LinkedIn Live Q&A, which is going to be on February 26th at 4 p.m. Eastern. For a discussion with Cradle to Career Muncie about their community-wide early grade reading efforts. I've heard that to make sure it's TikTok ready, that fellow advisor Mackenzie Mosby and the Cradle to Career Muncie team might be thinking about a coordinated dance. No pressure. But we'll share all those links to those resources. Otherwise, please stay connected to us at StriveTogether and the Cradle to Career Network by taking courses through the Training Hub, which can provide easy to access, high quality training grounded in proven approaches and tested by leaders across the country. And thank you so much for joining us. And we're excited to